Let us pray. We bless you, Lord our God, and thank you for the wisdom that you have made to tabernacle in our midst. We ask your blessing on us and on our commencement exercises. Make us mindful of your presence in our lives, your healing power, and your spirit of love and union. You who live and reign forever and ever. Amen. As Chancellor of St. John's University, in the name of the sponsoring Benedictine community, and in the name of the Board of Regents, I herewith call into session this commencement convocation at the conclusion of our 130th year for the conferring of the academic degrees granted by the university. I request Father Hilary Timish, President of the University, to take charge of these exercises.
Speaking for the faculty and the administration, as well as the monastic community, a warm welcome to you, our graduating class, and to your parents, relatives and friends, to our regents, and to other distinguished guests. This commencement concludes our 130th year with nearly 400 graduating seniors and 31 master's degree candidates. I believe it is our largest commencement exercise. I will do what I can to keep it from being our longest. The graduating class is full of interesting and promising people. 49 of you are graduating with special distinction today. Many of you are sons or relatives of alumni. Some of you are from overseas. Your plans for starting a career or seeking advanced education run the gamut from entering med school this fall to teaching English at a Buddhist monastery in South India. To all of you, my best wishes and prayers for full and rich lives. In your name, let me extend special recognition and thanks to your teachers, the faculties of the College of St. John's University and the College of St. Benedict, and the faculty of the School of Theology, professors, scholars, mentors in so many formal and informal ways. They are the heart of the university. Long after grades, papers, and devilishly difficult exams are dim memories, I hope you will recognize and appreciate their personal interest and friendship while you were students at St. John's. And my tribute, too, to the administration and support staff, especially to our academic officers, Sister Eva Hooker, Dean Robert Spaeth, Dean Daniel Finn, and to so many others, some of whom you perhaps don't know very well, but all of whom contribute so strongly to carrying out the mission of this educational community. And now on to our first speaker. Tony Ammon will speak for the senior class. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Gabriel Ammon, are here today with his brother and sister. Tony comes from Crookston. He transferred to St. John's to major in biology after his freshman year at the University of Minnesota. moving into a double on 4th Bennett in his first year at St. John's did a lot to build character. He is a 3-year veteran of AKS, the Campus Service Fraternity. He has been active in the Forum, the Campus Debate Society, in VISTO, Volunteers in Service to Others, and in student government. He is an alumnus of Edelbrock House, St. John's answer to Gracious Living. He plans to enter medical school in Duluth this fall after a strenuous summer of non-intellectual work. Tony Ammon.
I hope this goes as well as practice did. I'm very nervous now, but I want to say that I am honored to have been selected to represent the class of 1987. I'm still trying to figure out why I was nominated. Really, Paul Krenzelak, there are better ways to get back at a person than to make me grovel up here. Still, I am puzzled as to how I was selected. As Father Hillary said, I am a member of AKS. I was a member of the Senate that asserted its autonomy. I'm not on the basketball team. I do live in Edelbrock. And worse yet, I don't just live with Brian Doherty. I also consider him a very close friend of mine. Isn't America great? I'm wondering though, Father Hillary, will I receive my diploma if I continue? I think my parents would like to see me up on the altar permanently. Oh, jeepers. They figure if I was up here, they wouldn't have to worry about me. If you ask Father Dan Ward, he'll tell you not to worry. I used to go to confession with him and confess things I wish I would have done. You know. The things the rest of you guys were doing. First, in the name of the senior class, I would like to thank the faculty for their dedicated and persistent work. Here at St. John's, the relationship the students and the faculty share is definitely unique and one of the positive assets of our school. The emphasis towards the students, rather than the pursuit of their own career goals, is another way that St. John's distinguishes itself from other schools. I'd also like to give a special thanks to all of our parents, without whom none of us would be here. I want to assure you that the $50,000 you gave each of us to attend school here was well spent. And honestly, I can say only about $10,000 went to support our attendance at the local establishments of St. Joe. Today we have assembled from Edelbrock, Flinttown, Seton, and Tommy Hall. From Bernard, Bonnie, and Pat. From Bennett, Mary, Seidenbush, and the Eightplexes. From the Suckle House, the Estate, and the Bullpen. From the Driftwood, the Depot, the House, and the Creameries. We have assembled, but for what? Why are we here? Merely to get an empty black container? Which, if we pay our bills and pass all of our final courses, it will eventually hold a diploma, signifying we have completed 120 credits. But that is not what we are here for. So what are we really here for? Are we here to mark reality? Now we got to get a job? Or at least figure out a way to keep our parents and loan collection agencies off our backs? Does this mean we have to leave our innocent life behind the pine curtain and be tempted and corrupted by the real world, forcing us to compromise the great Benedictine values we have learned? What this day, this ceremony, and diploma really mean is that now we are a permanent part of St. John's and everything it stands for. It is much more than merely 4 years of academics. If all we wanted were academics, we could have attended St. Cloud State. Here's the clincher, though. Or worse yet, even St. Thomas. The years we have spent here at St. John's mean much more than getting a degree for the necessary credits. The years here mean many things. The maturity we should have gained, I was told to say that. Our goals and dreams that we have continually modified and strive to attain, the acceptance of believing in ourselves and the trust of others, the invaluable friendships we have gained, and the sense of community that abounds throughout our campus are firmly entrenched in our minds and memories. For a few moments, I would like to reflect with you on these points of St. John's, which now can never be taken away from us. What is maturity? Is it something that our parents hoped we would attain while attending school here? If you are like me, then your parents are still certain that you have a few years left here. Maturity is the personal growth we have experienced here, the good times as well as the bad. We build on our weaknesses and utilize our strengths to their fullest potential. One thing I have learned from Joe Cristoforo is that if there is sacramental wine left in the chalice, don't ask the priest if you should slam the rest. As one moved up in class rank here, we were allowed to live in honor code housing. The school rewarded us for being mature by giving us freedoms. But of course, there were always a few bad apples that spoiled it for the rest of us. Sign Bush 7. Oh, excuse me. Believe me, though, the guys in Edelbrock have never done anything to compromise the educated values of this fine institution. Along with maturity goes resourcefulness, and I must give my congratulations to Tom Mertens, who convinced the First Bank of St. Joseph to give him a loan to pay off his tab at Sal's. The goals and dreams we have and are continually striving for have given us direction over these past 4 years. Many of us have jobs and career paths, excuse me, which will begin immediately. Others of us have walls full of rejection letters and are still uncertain as to what we will do on Tuesday. We should not be afraid of this or any other future uncertainty that may exist in our lives. We hopefully have learned in these 4 years, inside as well as outside the classroom, from faculty, friends, and the monks, that success and happiness are not measured by society standards of money, career importance, and the accumulation of material goods, but by the belief in our own abilities as persons gifted with friends, life, and faith. As freshmen, most of us thought you had to study in college, and we all wanted to be a lawyer, or dentist, or engineer, or a doctor. But then some people soon realized that this was not true. There's a lot more to college than seeking a career. And so my roommates, Mike, Rick, Todd, and Joe, all management majors, are living proof of this. Our biggest worries as freshmen were surviving to the weekend and finding someone that was of age. Now that we are graduates, our worries are financial security and being responsible for ourselves, and maybe someday for others. What we need not worry about is the special memories that St. John's holds for each of us, and the continuing influence this place and these years will hold on each of our lives. The friends we have made here at St. John's will be among our closest friends for life. We have survived all the varieties of mystery meat in the refectory, Benny buses at 8 a.m., the grand opening of the gerbil cage at Sal's, our last finals here, getting up this morning, and the close camaraderie we have with each other. Today, as we begin our journeys away from Collegeville, It is not a time for goodbyes, but a chance to expand the friendships we have gained here and continue them throughout our lives. Finally, the sense of community of St. John's has been really exemplified by the class of 1987. Even though the Powers removed the bleachers, the Rat Pack still survived. The games at St. Thomas, in which 3/4 of the people in attendance were Johnnies. On campus, some of our classmates began addressing the issue of rights for students, because students should be recognized as partners of the community called St. John's. This sense of community really became evident when we responded to the deaths of our classmates, Dave Besser and Pat Mooney. The support we gave one another and the families of Pat and Dave showed how a group of individuals can and does come together to form a community. In closing, I want to say that we are now a permanent part of St. John's and what it stands for. And we will take this with us no matter where we go in life. The old basketball cheer really comes true today. For today, we have come here not merely for the diploma, but to say now, we are St. John's.
Our commencement speaker today was to be Carolyn Forshee, a noted young poet whose award-winning works have led her increasingly to awareness and involvement with the destitute people of the Third World. She spoke here 2 years ago about her experience in El Salvador. Unfortunately, she's unable to be with us today because of illness, but fortunately, she provided us with her text ahead of time. It is a sobering but eloquent plea for human concern. With her permission, we have modified it slightly, and I have asked Father John Clausen, a faculty member of her generation, to read it. Taking a phrase from her own conclusion, we've entitled her address, "The Work of Making a Better World."
Graduates, parents, friends, colleagues, confreres. I stand in front of you today using Carolyn Forshee's words, and I wish to make them as direct to you as I possibly can. So I will stay very close to her text. I was first invited to St. John's University in 1985. When you were sophomores. I was to read poetry and give a talk. My poems at that time expressed my experiences in El Salvador, where I spent the years 1978 to 1980 working as a translator of poetry under a Guggenheim grant. What I saw during those years in El Salvador changed my life, as well as my understanding of what it means to be educated. The students before me were younger then, and I was a little bit nervous about sharing with them the worst of what I had seen. I needn't have been. It is a country the size of Massachusetts or New Jersey, I began, with a population of 5 million people. 80% of them have no electricity, toilets, or running water. They have seldom tasted foods other than beans, corn, and rice. They drink powdered sorghum instead of coffee in a country well known for its coffee. The average man or woman dies at 47 years. 1 in 5 children does not reach the age of 5. Before speaking, I asked Monsignor Romero for his blessing, because I believe that the former Archbishop of San Salvador is still watching over the work of witness in El Salvador. The students before me listened and felt deep concern. Their questions were direct, pointed, and important. I left here feeling a certain measure of renewed faith. I am now the mother of a 1-year-old son, and busier than I ever was before, and more tired, and less able at times to think critically and coherently. Every parent here understands what I'm trying to say. But I wanted to accept the invitation to return to St. John's in part because I owe a great debt to you. And I feel I would like to share with you something of what has happened to me since we saw each other last. For this, I would like to read a few brief excerpts of a journal which I wrote about working in South Africa last year with my husband, who did a photographic document on apartheid while I taught a small class on human rights in Soweto. My journal begins in Paris after our stay in Africa. I am in the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, looking at photographs taken by Sebastião Salgado in the Sahel during the past few years. Here are the long processions of exodus from hunger, bones shining through flesh, the dead wrapped in wheat flour sacks from the Federal Republic of Germany. Here the flattened bags of intravenous fluids glowing in morning camp light. There, the corpse of an infant stuffed into a trouser leg. The living walk over the parched ground, clothed in what will become their burial shrouds. The Parisians who have come to look at these photographs are elegantly dressed and stand in small animated groups waving lit cigarettes. Salgado stands on the periphery, watching the Parisians. In a clinic on the outskirts of Alexandra Township in Johannesburg, there is a room cheerfully decorated with children's drawings, where European, American, and white South African doctors bend over the emaciated bodies of infants, each with a needle in its scalp, receiving the precious silvery drops of glucose. I am explained the procedure of oral irrigation therapy, a method by which the dehydrated children can be revived without the paraphernalia of Western medical technology. A liter of boiled water, a pinch of salt, a fistful of sugar, mixed and given with a spoon. To teach this procedure to every mother in the third world would cost what my countrymen spend on pet food in a given year. The Alexandra doctors are asked if they are afraid to be here. They gaze in the direction of the questioner uncomprehendingly. Salgado has taken a photograph of Dr. Luc van der Werken bending over a child near death in the village of Gurma Rahu. It is possible, perhaps, to imagine what she feels, squatting over the living remains on the sand floor of that hut. One could attempt a poem which might include the boy's bead necklace, the light on the doctor's face. It might have been possible, perhaps, for me to imagine Alexandra Clinic without having gone there. There are photographs, such as Salgado's, to help us with this. But there are things impossible to imagine, and they are also the things most difficult to write about when they're actually seen. We drive a wide scrape of poorly graded road, the dust blooming red behind our rented car, through rattling peeled stands of eucalyptus to the homeland Bafu, Botswana. We are destined for the village of Maboloka, a sprawling refuge dump of humanity, old people and children sheltered in breeze block, mud and tin, with a water spigot every few kilometers. They have been put out here to die, not mercifully, but slowly, of hunger, tuberculosis, dysentery. We visit Anna, an old woman who takes vitamins for her high blood pressure and blindness, and who keeps her keys to her refrigerator pinned to her bosom. She speaks Afrikaans to us, not having met white people who do not speak Afrikaans. The refrigerator is warm and unplugged. There is no electricity. It holds a few bottles of boiled water and her sack of mealies. With this, she keeps 16 children alive, some her own, some the children of people who have already perished. The keys ensure her dominion over the rations. The children gather round us, some not having seen white people before, and she shusses them away. The smallest is tied to her back with a rag. She supports them on 100 rand a month for food, fuel, and shelter, and the dearly expensive bins of water she buys from the village chief. The money comes from the eldest, who worked in the platinum mines until 2 days ago when he was fired. Now Anna and her 16 children are without any income at all. One must imagine her days to come, the unfastening of keys from her house dress, the decisions she must make. Imagination is not enough. Before I left her shack, she took my arm and drew me aside and whispered her question. Which one of these children do you think is the best? Which one of them should I feed? Victor Georgia, a correspondent for the Washington Post, no longer believes that the East-West conflict poses, quote, as serious a threat to humanity as the despair of the world's poor, close quote. Georgia has abandoned his life in Washington for a remote village in the Himalayas to report on the life of its villagers. After all, he says, that is how most of the people in the world live. It is Americans who are peculiar. So it is as likely that the 20th century human condition is understood in a hovel on the outskirts of Jakarta as in Paris or New York. There are then two human worlds, and the bridges between them are burning. You are now about to enter your 5th year of higher education, not on a college campus, but in the walks of life. Many of your parents have been engaged in such higher education for 20 years or more. May you live full lives in a full measure of human years. May your hearts remain open and compassionate. May you remain awake. I have not spoken to you of these brief experiences to discourage you, but to hearten you, to celebrate the solutions you will attempt in the work of making a better world. I want to close with the words of the Turkish poet Nahim Hikmet. This earth will grow cold, a star among stars, and one of the smallest, a gilded mote on the blue velvet. I mean this, our planet Earth. This earth will grow cold one day, not like a heap of ice or a dead cloud even, but like an empty walnut, it will roll along in pitch black space. You must grieve for this right now. You have to feel this sorrow now, for the world must be loved this much if you are going to say, I lived. Thank you.
For many years, St. John's has singled out for recognition persons distinguished for accomplishments, particularly in harmony with Benedictine ideals. This year, we are pleased to give the Pax Christi Award to Dr. Albert C. Outler, a Methodist minister and theologian who has been a leading ecumenist by his example and his work for a good half-century. Sister Eva Hooker will read the citation.
Who would have thought that a Methodist minister brought up in Georgia and teaching in Texas would become for many of the bishops at the Second Vatican Council their most valued and trusted interpreter of what they themselves were doing? Albert Cook Outler, your eminence as an ecumenist was well established among Protestants and the Orthodox by the time the Vatican Council began. For you were a creative force in the World Council of Churches, especially its Faith and Order Commission. Within a very few weeks of the Vatican Council's opening in 1962, you were being acknowledged by the other official observers and by scores of council fathers as the historian who knew the context, the theologian who knew the language and the languages, and the gregarious human being whose wit and humor spiced ecclesiastical life in Rome during those long weeks. Your book, Methodist Observer at Vatican II, published 2 years after the Council ended, is a significant interpretation for our understanding of that turning point of Catholic history. Not long after the Council, you were elected the first non-Catholic president of the American Catholic Historical Association, at a time when you were also shaping decisively the doctrinal positions of the United Methodist Church. You are an editor and translator of Augustine, an authority on the Greek Church Fathers, and a pioneer in the complex interplay of psychology and religion. Your first book, Psychotherapy and the Christian Message, was a breakthrough document in a field that has since become commonplace. Those who know you well are privy to the secret that the only thing you have mastered more thoroughly than the history of Christianity is the statistics of the baseball record book. Your lifetime bibliography contains more than 250 items covering the whole range of Christian thought. Your chief scholarly monument is the definitive 4-volume edition of the Sermons of John Wesley, some 2,000 pages of meticulous scholarship, the fruit of decades of patient, tenacious tracking of sources. By repeated visits to the libraries of London and Oxford, you have familiarized yourself with every book Wellesley says he read. And as a result, you have provided literally thousands of new annotations to the sermons. Your aim has not been completeness for its own sake, but the demonstration of Wellesley's thorough involvement in the culture of his own time, a culture itself steeped in the pagan and Christian classics. Without minimizing Wesley's familiar figure as evangelist and folk preacher, you have proved how deeply imprinted by his reading of the Greek Fathers Wesley was. As a result of your magnum opus, John Wesley will from now on have to be treated seriously in any account of Christian and Catholic theology. Professor at Duke University and Yale University, and then for a quarter century at Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University, you have been and are still the embodiment of the responsible and imaginative quest for Christian unity. By a happy providence, we are gathered here to honor you on the holiest day in the Methodist calendar. It was on May 24th, 1738, 249 years ago today, that John Wesley went reluctantly to an Anglican Society meeting in Aldersgate Street, London. Of his experience there, while hearing a reading from the preface to Martin Luther's commentary on Romans, he reports, "I felt my heart strangely warmed. I felt I did trust in Christ, Christ alone for salvation." Who would have thought that Aldersgate, the decisive turning point in the history of Methodism, would be commemorated almost a quarter of a millennium later in a Benedictine monastery and university in Minnesota? Such are the mysterious and wonderful ways of God, and the hearts of all of us at St. John's University, Collegeville, Minnesota, are warmed as we, in our 130th year, are pleased to present to you our Pax Christi Award.
Father Albert and Father Hillary, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
This is lighter. This is lighter. And now the senior ensemble, Mike Seaman, Matt Haynes, Jeff Barnett, Jim Cacciatore, Keith Wildenberg, and Michael Toulouse will sing The Hunter's Farewell.
Who aloft thy head did raise, forest green, the mountains crowning, glad in heart thy beauty owning, I will sing thy Maker's praise. Glad in heart, I will sing thy Maker's praise. Fare thee well, 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 thou forest old. Fare thee well, fare thee well, thou forest old. We must seek our home below, leave the deer in peace reposing, ere for us the chase is closing. Once again our horns we blow, once again our horns we blow. Fare thee well, 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 thou forest old. Fare thee well, fare thee well, thou forest old. What beneath thy shade we swore in the distant world shall bind us, true to thee each year shall find us, faithful children evermore. True to thee each year shall find us, faithful children evermore. Fare thee well, 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 thou forest old. Fare thee well, fare thee well, thou forest old.
Will the candidates for the degrees of Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Arts please rise? Father Hillary, I present the candidates for the degrees of Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Arts, which have been approved by the faculty of the university.
By virtue of the authority committed to me, I confer upon you the degrees of Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Arts which have been approved by the faculty of the university and for which you have been recommended. The Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences will please have the candidates come forward.
The degree of Bachelor of Arts, egregia cum laude, is conferred upon Christopher Brownell and Gregory Mahachek. The degree of Bachelor of Science, summa cum laude, is conferred upon Paul Krenzelak, Richard Stock, Michael Jost, Thomas Miller II, Thomas Stewart, and Thomas Gibbons. The degree of Bachelor of Arts, summa cum laude, is conferred upon Jack Trotter, Jr. The degree of Bachelor of Science, magna cum laude, is conferred upon John Bauer, David Kuntz, David Mercer, Michael Culligan, Matthew Hattenauer, Jay Bartkowski, Kurt Guggenberger, Michael Shreve, Bradley Nelson, Anthony Luneau, David Moss, Jonathan Cran, Douglas Schultz, and Randolph Schuler. The degree of Bachelor of Arts, magna cum laude, is conferred upon William Wyant, James Cacciatore, Joel Smith, Daniel Forstner, Brian Lynn, George Mader, and Keith Wildenberg. The degree of Bachelor of Science, cum laude, is conferred upon Paul Eitzen, Charles Pilon, John Wallace, Michael Bauman, Scott Goose, and Greg Leininger. The degree of Bachelor of Arts, cum laude, is conferred upon Brian Flynn, William Husen, Matthew Haynes, Daniel Watson, Michael Stadelman, Michael McCarthy, Jeffrey Barnett, Michael Toulouse, David Andrini, and Timothy Abel. The degree, I believe the first degrees are Bachelor of Science. Would you please come forward? The degree of Bachelor of Science is conferred upon Charles Stark, William Nettleton, David Crean, Christopher Huber, James Kuklock, Andrew Schmidt, William Rodrigue, Michael West, Richard Gomez, David Hamlin, Gerald Pash, Darren Matthews, Henry Schutz, Anthony Lessenhop, Paul Tinas, Kevin Ahlstrom, Kevin Hill, Bradley Cunningham, Patrick Menke, Timothy Healy, Thomas Pappenfuss, Vincent Ryder, John Sveal, John Bierman, Thomas Reschenberg, Sean Turner, Gerald Chunat, Thomas Franta, Joseph Osterbauer, Timothy Somers, Timothy Cruikshank, Michael Krakis, James Miracle II, Christopher Scherer, Barry Gettler, Michael Hagan, David Ace, Patrick Sweeney, John Seiler, Daniel Kibbe, Scott Gosman, Michael Smith, Mark Hoffman, Joseph Vitt, Paul Bernard, Robert Menachino, Dean Luby, Mark Bingham, Robert Regal, Wesley Grupvasink, Barry Lindeman, John Zatour, Timothy Dickmeyer, Robert Paul, James Nash Jr., James Rathmanner, Tony Patz, Frank Munsauer, Matthew Barnett, James Oles, Michael Wahlberg, Joseph Baker, Richard Ryshavy, Nicholas Rogie, Max Grodnick, Frederick Rearman, Anthony Stocker, Rodney Schwagel, Paul Dingman, Fred Corso III, Roy Erspamer, Thomas Malloy, James Lesner, Michael Leary, Daniel Toninato, Jacob Muvik, Kenneth Lund, John Schillow, Michael Muff, Brian Mulligan, Joseph Kraska, Richard Sear, Michael Williams, David Happy, Robert Walsh III, Sean Daly, Brett Olson, Clayton Swenson, Timothy Deggy, Paul Rothstein, Patrick Kelberg, Michael Galley, Thomas Grant, P. Michael Sitters, Mark Appelgren, James Skabeck, John DeRocher, Stephen Ryich, Timothy Broghammer, Michael Naraki, Thomas Mertens, Conan Lansom, Brian Levitsky, Martin Devine, John Flynn, Thomas Wills, Brian Doherty, Eric Burright, Pierre Bernard, Richard Odenthal, Charles Campa, Anthony Ammon, Joel Ziegler, Michael Bednarik, Alan Reichel, John Wickner, Bienvenido Palaganas Jr., Richard Tokar, Eric Shevland, James Nesselrode III, John Mullen, Michael Weber, Jeffrey Stryker, David Mullen, William Heiser, Scott Murphy, David Bergman, Paul Urey, John Hastings, Ted Schmidt, John Quinlan, Timothy Gallagher, Robert Reif, David Lang, Paul Foley, Scott Swadel, Patrick Farley, Ben Campbell, Harold Hobday, Anthony Pearson, Tony Potter, Paul Marvin, John Prozinski, Kevin Brown, Stephen Steffel, Mark Patton, Timothy Strife, Gregory Friedrichs, Steve Lindell, John Weiner, Charles Kaysen III, Robert Jung, Andrew Wild, John Heinen, Bradley Meeks, Todd Ritter, James Wise, Christopher Tokar, Stephen Ogren, Timothy Lloyd, Todd Traxler, Bradley Gunner, John Welch, Christian Ennisvet, Owen Trout, Philip Johnson, Brian Backus, Alex Schlepper, Edward Lynch, Joseph Meyer, Robert Strain, Peter Villalta, Timothy Murnane, David Anderla, Errol McPhee, Alden Williamson, Bernard Terrian, Daniel Dundon, Brian McGlinch, John Rogers, Timothy Lamour, Leo Urich, Daniel Kroner, Daniel McWraith, Robert Matthey, Daniel Schaefer, Mark Disty, Robert Goosens, Timothy Payton, Craig Lambrecht, Robert McGarry Jr., Raymond Brooks Jr., Oral Hudson, Patrick Bailey, Douglas Anderson, James Ruel, Michael Peterson, Eric Wishman, Charles Lamb, Ward Blasco, Stephen Lair, William Lemieux, R. Christopher Ditton, Carl Thielen, Jeffrey Donius, Kevin Danahay, Timothy Heaney, Michael Trudell, Richard Gendro, Antonio Knowles, John Castle, Kurt Myers, John Barsodi, Craig Sheldon, Patrick Manea, James Bernard, Robert Rockin III, Bennett Callan, Paul Howe, Lawrence Ross, Eric Amel, John Cooney, Michael Bailey, Victor Rhyme, Brian Sweeney, Christopher Hudacek, Scott Streed, Robert Freeland, Michael Connolly, Daniel DeVos, Mark Kruger, Peter Gavin, Dana DeCluett, Todd Benaby, Joseph O'Brien, Michael McDonald, Donald Pribble, Thomas Poole, Richard Doherty. The degree of Bachelor of Arts is conferred upon Curtis Carson, Stephen Bowler, Robert Hart, William Vitt, Carl Kohler, Russell Scholler Jr., Paul Weitzel, Mark Haig, Sean Fennessy, David Wyrens, Brian Pallow, David Close, Paul Sundell, Paul Lehman, Joseph Skemp, Jr., James Krasowski, Michael Seaman, Jr., John Hallstrom, Joseph Hoppy, Michael Sweeney, Patrick Costello, Andrew Clark, Joseph Trepanier, Todd Guggesberg, Victor Kerpiers, Kevin Pelkey, Mark Hymans, Thomas Johnson, Paul Trewartha, William Baldus, Bruce Prokosh, John Langen, Robert Evans, Douglas Imholt, Pierre Vincent Willette, Joseph Meyer, Scott Fensky, Thomas Palmy, Dennis Gapp, Craig Burdan, Robert Nimchik, Michael Halloran, Joseph Shea, Terrence Hendrickson, Joachim Breuer, Raymond Benning, Peter Gassert, Alfredo Aragon, Michael Oakes, Gregory Ammett, Robert McGarry, Stephen Johnston, Michael Zender, Paul Harris, Francis Moga, John Woodward, Kurt Anderson, Kevin Kenkel, Donald Logering, Joseph Germscheid, Richard Stromwall, Joseph Cristoforo, Richard Sitars, Jaime Delaga, John Bissonette, Patrick Wall, Michael Tess, Stephen Kane, Robert Bjorklund, Michael Warner, Matthew Nutting, Ian Murphy, Terrence Hayter, David Jensen, Gilbert Wilson, Kenneth Byrne, Joseph Bennett, John Rudd, Scott Kozek, Stephen Kramer, Michael Pellegrini, Parnell Thill, Stephen Pellegrini, George Nemenich III, Charles Turnquest Jr., Mark Zedeklik, John Polad, Michael McGreevy, David Jordan, Matthew Kapsner, Michael Marchek, and Jonathan Eichten.
Will the candidates for the degrees of Master of Divinity, Master of Arts, and Master of Theological Studies please rise? Father Hilary, I present the candidates for the degrees of Master of Divinity, Master of Arts, and Master of Theological Studies, which have been approved by the faculty of the university.
By virtue of the authority committed to me, I confer upon you the degrees of Master of Divinity, Master of Arts, and the Master of Theological Studies, which have been approved by the faculty of the university and for which you have been recommended. The Dean of the School of Theology will please have the candidates come forward.
The degree of Master of Divinity is conferred upon Michael Ernest Broussard. Thomas G. Crowley. Nicholas F. Daub. Paul C. Egglesare. Kenneth M. Crone. Michael C. Ritchell. And David William Timmerman. The degree of Master of Arts is conferred upon Margaret Ryan Boats, Master of Arts in Theology with concentration in systematics. Cecilia M. Bonacci, Master of Arts in Religious Education. George I. Perales, Master of Arts in Liturgical Studies. Ryan Thomas Perkins, Master of Arts in Theology with concentration in Church History. And Thomas Nicholas Schutz, Master of Arts in Theology with concentration in Scripture. The degree of Master of Theological Studies is conferred upon Rhoda May Anderson. And Anthony R. Michaels.
Let us pray. Lord our God, we thank you for bringing these graduates to this point in their lives. We ask you to watch over them as they go forth with renewed strength and knowledge. Make them thankful to all their benefactors, their parents, families, and friends, and bless all of us in our efforts to bring your wisdom to the struggles and visions of our daily life. You live forever and ever.